So we will kick off. I'm going to invite Corrine Barry to the stage. So a big round of applause, please. Corrine is the Director for Net Zero and East Coast at RWE, and you have used, this is a fabulous introduction, your years of experience on developing offshore wind to help RWE hit net zero, covering training, renewables, and all of the assets on the East Coast from Blythe to East Anglia. Good heavens, that's quite a remit, so thank you for making the time. And we're also delighted to be joined by Peter Gibson, MP. Another round of applause, please. So, Peter is the MP for Darlington, and I think also we owe you a bit of a congratulations today because you're now PPS in the Energy Department, which is fantastic news. So a wonderful department, extremely timely of yesterday's news. And I know you'll do some brilliant work for the department and continue your fantastic work for the region and the government. But it does mean, as my understanding and as you've explained, that you perhaps won't be able to talk as freely about energy and some of those energy matters. But today we're here to talk about levelling up and that broader debate. But I will be joining you on a third seat, so if there are any questions on energy, we don't have to skip over them and we can take them. So just to make sure there is no misunderstandings, Peter is not avoiding questions. There's a great explanation for it. So Corrine, I now hand over to you and you're going to take us through to 2:10, and then we will head into the panel that you will chair.
Lovely. Well, first of all, thank you very much for the Chamber and for National Gas for today. Fantastic. And Jake. And also thank you very much, Peter, for joining us. I can second the congratulations.
Thank you.
So you aptly said there were some great announcements yesterday, Jake. And one of those, and throw this out to perhaps both of you, was the £260 million investment in supply chain. And that was around for offshore, for carbon capture and for the supply, the green energies basically. And what I'd really like to know is what that 960 million means for sort of your constituents and the supply chain opportunities and levelling up, Peter. It'd be really interesting.
Well, first of all, can I say thank you so much for choosing Darlington as the place to host your conference. Darlington is very much firmly on the map as a result of a whole host of announcements that we've enjoyed here over the last couple of years. And this is not the first conference that's taken place in this room following my election and me encouraging organisations to come here. So you are very welcome. Your pounds spent in the local economy are very welcome. Your money spent in the hotel bar and in the hotel rooms is very welcome. Darlington has been on a bit of a journey, it has to be said, over the last couple of years, and we've seen tremendous interest in the town, in part due to the work that Ben Houchen does as the Tees Valley Mayor, restoring our pride and sort of setting the stall out as a place for growth and jobs. And I think building on top of that, you saw a whole host of new Conservative MPs elected in this region, all of whom are from the region, born in the region, grown up in the region, gone to school, run businesses. So the politics of our region has changed in a very kind of real, genuine way, because those people who are now its elected representatives are from the community. And then Rishi, who is our immediate next door neighbour, incredible to have the Chancellor in the constituency next door, and then incredible to have the Prime Minister in the constituency next door. So he's a very familiar face, was already a very familiar face to us in the town. And that decision to plant the Darlington Economic Campus here came about as a result of a number of things. Ben was pushing for it, and the rest of the Conservative MPs in the region were pushing for it. Could have gone to Newcastle, could have gone to Bradford, could have gone to Leeds. And if you plant something like that in a city that's already full of offices and suits and policy and government, it wouldn't really have a great deal of impact. But what we've seen in the few short years that the Darlington Economic Campus has been here is that we've seen people get jobs at the heart of government from our town. we've seen a steady stream of government ministers, and I keep a tally in the office, and we have now breached 60 ministerial visits to Darlington since the last election. I think there's only probably London itself has probably had more than that. And we're seeing other businesses attracted to coming here. So we recently had the news that Deloitte relocating an office to the region. And then on a wider perspective, you've got the investment in the free ports, the investment at Tees Works, the saving of the airport, which has been kind of a linchpin for a lot of that inward investment. So it's a really exciting time to be involved in politics, and really exciting for somebody who comes from the region and has always felt that the North East could do so much better and had such a better future than it's perhaps been looked after in the past. And to see that come to fruition is deeply rewarding.
Yeah, nice. So maybe bring you in, Jake, and why do you think that Darlington as a region gets so much investment? And why are you starting Project Union here? What makes it so attractive from a green perspective for investment reasons?
Yeah, so good question. So one of the reasons when we think about where we're going to position future infrastructure is thinking about where supply and demand will ultimately form. So we move gas as a business, and that gas today is natural gas, and in the future it'll be hydrogen. And we know that hydrogen is going to keep businesses going, it's going to keep the lights on, and it's going to keep us safe when the wind is not blowing and the sun is not shining. And fundamentally, when we think, where do we want to start? We look at where existing skills bases lies, and there's fantastic skills in this region and local suppliers. The local suppliers do not appear overnight. They require decades of investment ahead of delivery, and we know that this region is one that's rich in a skills base. Ultimately, the government signalling a move to Darlington is incredibly attractive and really creates greater emphasis on the region. And thirdly, when we think about a local starting point, we have to think about where we're going to have businesses that are going to collectively support our ambition. And when we think about a collection of businesses, when you look at the likes of Net Zero Teesside and then how it spreads out outside of Teesside and into the broader region, we have a huge amount of almost sort of capital and weight and gravity that's going to attract everyone here. And look, fundamentally, to get here, Darlington is incredibly well connected, and it is a fantastic region. And the more thought and the more thinking we put into it, the more this looks like a great place to start for those anchor clients.
How do other areas, should we say, you think of the UK replicate? What can they learn from what you have as this? What's the magic ingredients that you have here that we can help other parts of the UK with levelling up in the same way?
I think there's a number of things. The skills base and the existing infrastructure that we had around the oil and gas, chemicals, steel industry, that industrial base and the skills that flow from that are really important to the region. We're actually geographically a very small region, but incredibly well economically interconnected. It's a 10-minute drive to Stockton, it's a 15-minute drive to Middlesbrough. Hartlepool's 25 minutes. It's not a difficult region to get around, and there's already that connectivity between people living and working and enjoying leisure time and having family throughout the region. So it's already well connected in that perspective. But I think the really pivotal thing that I think happened here was that creation of combined authority and the election of Ben Houchen in 2017. That has really been the springboard. And then you feed in the fact that Rishi was next door to us. Rishi was the guy who wrote the policy paper in respect of free ports. And so Ben, having won that election, and let's be honest about our regional politics here on the Tees Valley, it's an area where Labour had dominated for decades and decades. And I think it came as a surprise to many of us, even those of us who were out knocking on doors for Ben in 2017, that he won that election. And so he's already front and centre page because of his being elected in a typically industrial, traditionally Labour region. You've got the connection with the Prime Minister, the now Prime Minister in the constituency next door. You then had the whole 2019 election victories that we had. And so the change in the politics of the region is part of the picture that I think has led to people becoming much more interested in it. So that the lessons I think to other regions would be play on your existing skills base and your existing regional heritage. What does your existing skills base look like in terms of jobs of the future? Signing up to a cohesive, comprehensive political strategy with local authority, members of parliament, combined authorities, all singing from the same page and working hand in glove with industry to make it attractive. No business wants to come to a region where politics are difficult and challenging and they're not being welcomed. And if you've got some of your politicians who are repeatedly telling the outside world that it's grim round here, it's tough, it's challenging, we're forgotten about, it doesn't make it attractive to people. And we've changed that conversation in this region so dramatically that we are now an attractive place to come to.
Yeah, and
I completely agree. I mean, I was just going to add, Corrine, from it. It's kind of that point, isn't it? That it's easy. So everything you've described of it being attractive, one of the reasons we're here today is you've very kindly given your time, which you don't have to do, but you have. We have the Minister coming, we have Lord Houchin, but we have very broad cross-party support here. You know, we're a business, we're political, but we enjoy that there is a combined authority. We enjoy there's broad political consensus on the strength of the region, and that's why it makes it a very easy place to do business. And in addition, when you think about I was kind of, when I was preparing for this event, I was thinking back and thinking, when was my first project with the region? And it was during COVID. I was at KPMG, and we were submitting all the data around jobs and investment for the region, submitting that first cluster bid. And I remember looking back through those old papers, and you think it's the intensity of the value in the region. You know, this is the region that makes hydrogen today, uses hydrogen. It's the region that has a high GVA and certain jobs. It's a region that's got high value add, foreign direct investment. It's a very attractive pool of capital, both people and finance. So, and then when you couple politics onto that.
And as you said, incredibly well connected transport-wise as well.
Absolutely.
Airport, A1,
yeah.
East Coast Main Line.
Yep. I'm going to be moving out of London soon.
So, going back to some of the levelling up, obviously we're so ideally located here on the East Coast and leading sort of the green agenda for the UK almost, for decarbonisation on this side of the coast. What about the opportunities for, and maybe it's not for you, but exportation, you know, across the continent to assist in levelling up? And what are your thoughts and aspirations for?
Well, I'm incredibly proud of this region. I was born here, I was raised here. My motivation for getting involved in politics was that I thought that our region could do better. We heard yesterday in the Chancellor's statement that we've gone from being the 9th biggest manufacturer in the world to the 8th biggest manufacturer in the world. So let's scotch the rumour and myth that we are not a manufacturing nation anymore. And we're also, you know, big in exporting our services as well. And we know that intelligence and skills base that we've got here in the Tees Valley, that skills base, I know people in my family and their wider networks of people who grew up in this region and have worked in this region and have acquired skills in oil and gas and petrochemicals. And they effectively form the Teesside Mafia. So you travel to anywhere else in the world and you're bound to find people from Teesside working in those sectors who did their apprenticeships at ICI or at British Steel or worked in industry here. And so that's incredibly proud. We've got a fantastic skills base to start from. And then we're looking forward to that news that's coming out in respect of Nissan and that investment just up the road. I was privileged to be at the opening of the electric battery factory up there just a few months ago. So we're an incredibly proud region of what we can do and achieve. And to be on this side of the fence as a politician, being able to sell our region in an incredibly positive way to attract all of you here today to have this conference, but also to, raise the profile of the region as a place to invest, where those skills and opportunities are, where people have got a much more kind of can-do attitude to things, I think is incredibly positive.
I think as well, we've got a audience poll question. If I just grab the clicker, we're trying to get some participation from you guys. So what is the biggest enabler of net zero for the East Coast? If you could maybe all log in and have a go and have an answer. It'd be great to see what you think, and then we can direct some questions back. Government support. So we've had 7 so far. 50% saying government support. All 33% local skills. 39. Oh, government support and local skills is tied. It's 22. Okay. So it's. Oh wow. Yeah. Okay, that's interesting. So we've got obviously local skills at the top with 33%, and not too far behind with government support and finally private finance, private investment. So the UK used to be at the front for green investment, and we've kind of lost that. According to some people, we've kind of lost that front-facing flag of the number one place to invest for green. How do you attract, or what would you say we need to do to continue to invest, to gain investment for green investment, specifically here more?
Well, I don't think that green investment's gone away.
Right.
I genuinely don't think it's gone away at all. You can always find some statistics or a report or some lobby group that's going to criticise something in some way. You can always find a quote that justifies your argument, whatever your standpoint is. I think this is really interesting, because I think this actually tells the story of what levelling up is.
Yeah.
Government alone cannot level up.
No.
Yeah. It's about government investment being an enabler of local skills and leveraging that private finance to develop the jobs and the skills that are out there. And I think that poll shows that one of the leading things that we've got here is our skills base. Yep. You've got the government investing here in a variety of ways, but that's then leveraging outside businesses coming in and saying, government supporting that, there's a skills base there, there's an opportunity there, they've got the infrastructure, they've got the transport connectivity. That's a great place to invest.
Mm. Yeah, and I'd agree. I think it's, like you say, shows a nice blend of what's required, mix of good ingredients for success, really, and what other regions on the East Coast can learn from further south in the Humber as well.
Indeed.
Yeah, for sure. Quite surprised to see that regulation down there is not one to bring up, actually quite a lot lower than I would expect it to be. I thought people might have something to say on regulation around policies, but it's nice to see it's not at the forefront.
Regulation, we have a world-leading, there's some government colleagues in the room, so I mustn't say anything bad, but we have world-leading regulation, in networks and the energy sector with Ofgem, with the HSE, with other regulatory institutions. We are seen internationally as a leader. Now, what was interesting about yesterday with the autumn statement is that the Chancellor said levelling up is net zero, and switch that into reverse, it's exactly the same thing, right? So when we think about attracting that private capital to the region, regulation is almost a great enabler. But it's like Peter says, you need the skills. So actually government targeting funds, which we've seen on skills development, is a fantastic enabler. And then the private finance should follow when you attract regimes that provide certainty to investors. We've seen that in offshore wind in the region with the contracts for difference. We'll likely see the contracts for difference used for hydrogen production. And then the industrial cluster in Teesside has obviously been awarded Track 1 status, and the benefits of that will radiate out. And that's now going through, as many in the room will know if they're emitters, the final negotiations for that.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point around AR6 as well, and the separation from offshore wind. I know you can't comment, but...
Oh yeah, let's not do an AR6 debate. The room will be an uproar.
Yeah, but the fact that there's a separate funding pot now for offshore wind to try and help stabilise That's interesting as well. So yeah, okay, great. I would quite like to open it up to the floor for some questions, if that's all right with you. Try and get some. So if there's any the audience that have anything they'd like to jump in or ask any questions, it'd be really good to get some audience participation. Does anyone like to jump in at all? If not, I can take it back. Yeah, gentleman there with the glasses.
So Patrick Craven, Director of Policy at City and Guilds, a vocational awarding body. And I guess one of the things that interests me is, with a lot of the references that you've made to net zero and demand, etc., to what extent is there the supply of labour market available to satisfy the demands that are going to come out of that, bearing in mind that it's probably take us a little while to get a pipeline from school through into the labour market? Or do we need to think about how we transition existing labour market to actually fulfil that demand much more quickly?
That's actually quite a good question for our next panel, but I don't know if you want to answer on that, Peter?
As a region that still has higher than the national average rates of unemployment, there are opportunities in the jobs market. I think we still have a challenge as a region, having people that are available for work having the right skills to fill. We know that there are certain challenges in certain sectors whereby, for example, a welder comes onto the jobs market and in this particular region can get a job very, very quickly because there's almost a skills shortage. I think what we need to be doing is having conversations with our local colleges, our technical colleges, our universities, to make sure that they align with the industries that we've got. And I've had some really interesting conversations with people like CPI, who do the bioscience stuff here, with Cummins, who are doing engineering here in Darlington, and getting those to have those conversations with local institutions to make sure that the skills that they're training young people for are the skills that we need in the future. And I think that's a really important conversation. I don't think government alone can solve that. Having the right support for educational institutions, having the right careers guidance and advice to young people, making sure that young people in our community are alive and aware of the real opportunities that lie on their doorstep. Once upon a time, unless you wanted to go and work at the steelworks or the chemical factory, you were going to get a job in a call centre here in Darlington. You had to leave the region to have a career and to progress. That is no longer the case. We have in effect stopped the brain drain, but I still think that there's an awful lot more can be done, particularly in our primary schools and secondary schools, to effectively tell people about the amazing opportunities that are here in our community and set them on the path to get the skills that they need for the industries that are growing in our region. And so it's down to you guys really about selling that story about what you need in 3 years' time, 5 years, 10 years' time, because today's primary school kids could be the guys that you need in 10 years' time. So having those conversations is really critical. But I think that's a really important part of the levelling up conversation, because you go into a school, and I've visited virtually every school in Darlington, 2 left to go, virtually every school, and they are often quite amazed at the range of opportunities when I talk about them, because they're not necessarily alive to all of those opportunities. So there's a real challenge for business and industry to go into our schools to kind of raise those aspirations to get people to move into those sectors.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think from an RWE perspective, I know that we've had a lot of engagement with local schools and academies, right from primary up through to universities, to try and help bridge that gap of, excuse the pun, but educating the schools about the types of jobs and the roles that exist, and trying to help them align, and also inspire the children that, like you say, they don't have to leave these regions. They can have an education and a great job and a career in a green energy sector on their doorstep. And there's a lot of there's a lot of disparity in some regions where it's not equally based, that not every child gets that same opportunity, and we try to make sure that every single child or person or student, regardless of age or gender, etc., or location or economic background, is given the same opportunities, especially on some of these coastal areas that do have a lower economic background. And there are some areas or regions where historically they're just fishing towns and ports, and that's what their fathers did and their fathers' fathers, and they don't know what they don't know, and they don't know the aspirations that they could have, and making sure that it's available to all levels and every student, and it's not just the top students in every class, and because it takes all sorts. You need a diverse workforce, and I think it's a really important point that it's actually on us to help get out there and connect with from industry to connect with education. And I don't know what your experience has been with National Gas.
Yeah, I completely endorse your point on diversity of skills. Like, if we don't have the most diverse skills, you're not going to solve the most complex problem. It's net zero, right? So point one, I thought it was a good question, by the way, and I suspect you're going to know a lot more than I do about this point, but skills passports. So as a business, we were looking at we're basically looking at the transferability of natural gas and hydrogen. And the key stat that came out is that there's 94% transferability of the skills. So if you work in natural gas today, it may be that 10% of your job is incredibly specialist to the gas itself, but 90% of it, 94% of it, is actually operating in a hazardous environment, as many of you will know in this region, operating in a high quality, safety first environment. And therefore we need some, I think, national framework that provides the hydrogen sector, which is going to be the big economy of the future, a set of standards that we can align against. Now, many of you will know these already do exist. There are passports, there's skills frameworks. But when I speak to my colleagues in skills and our talent team, they kind of go, Jake, there's quite a lot of them. What's the one we definitely need to align to? And secondly, I remember when I was doing the business case for Hinckley, and you mentioned welders. To get a good welder, and many of you in this room will have had this in your business, apparently it's 15 years of training, getting they have a set of frameworks that say you're meeting a certain grade, and you end up with over a decade of training to meet the standard required. So that's kind of one point. But also, as you say, if you're in a school and you're saying my carbon capture storage plant is going to be online in 10 years, but that kid is 10, well, actually, they're not going to be out of their apprenticeship or degree for 13, 14 years. So we've got a mismatch of skills against the pipeline of projects. So government coming together to give it certainty on that pipeline and then map the skills against it so that you're always gradually increasing. Now, many of you who are in skills will say, Jake, we've done that before because we have the National Infrastructure Development Plan, we have the skills framework that was matched to it, but it was never actually matched against the finance that was delivered. So I think there's going to have to be greater coordination moving forward between your department, but also DFE, business and trade, etc., to come together and say, what's our one pipeline? And then internationally, which your region is fantastically placed for, internationally, how can we ensure an exchange of talent? And I think I'm looking forward to hearing some of that on the next panel, because I want to know the answers.
Great stuff. I think we've got time for another question, if anyone...
Thank you. Kerry Mullen from Hynamics, so EDF's low carbon hydrogen business. To the Slido, I guess, regulation is quite low down. That's a surprise generally for me too, but not maybe when we're looking at the East Coast, because those are really key success factors that they have as a local area. They've had government funding, they've got this mass of skills. But to this point about education, slightly different twist on it, but have Darlington, or maybe even just more widely in the East Coast, taken that message of your desire for net zero to people like planning authorities and like people who approve planning permission, because that's quite critical to deliver renewable developments, whether it's wind, solar or hydrogen, for example?
Planning. Didn't take long for that to come up. So I'm going to defer. I'm happy to take our view, but
I'm just going to take a stab at this. Obviously, the majority of planning decisions are taken by the relevant local authority. And here in the Tees Valley, you've got 5 local authorities. There are certain functions that Tees Valley Combined Authority, in conjunction with its special economic area status, has got for the Tees Works site, which has kind of unblocked a lot of the planning that might necessarily have slowed that job up. And I think we can see the speed with which Tees Works has developed and progressed has partly been able to do because a lot of that red tape. I know we've got some councillors in the room. Those councillors who've sat on planning committees will know that the challenges that we face in local politics in terms of community not wanting something or wanting something, and that decision being taken by local politicians. I read something yesterday on the train back from London about unblocking the planning system, and the story is something along the lines of, if it took one planning officer to read every word in this particular planning application, it would take him something like 300 years of his working life to plod through all of these documents. So I think, speaking very generally rather than specifically about net zero, we've got to do more to accelerate planning applications. We heard yesterday about the plans to effectively enable local authorities to accelerate them more quickly for a higher fee, but if they don't do it within a certain timescale, they lose that planning fee and have to do it for free. Now, local authorities are not going to like that, but we know that unless we incentivise with carrots and sticks, we're not going to get change. And I think seeing that change that comes to local authorities as a result of that can only be a positive thing, accelerating things through the planning system. Because we don't want to, we shouldn't want to. Our politicians certainly shouldn't want to block investment that brings jobs and opportunities to our communities. We certainly shouldn't.
Again, autumn statement, I think, fantastic points. And the autumn statement yesterday showed some quite new ideas around how planning is going to be delivered. So this idea that if you're building pylons, your community may receive local benefits in the region and then an enduring benefit moving forward. There's some quite interesting points there around, obviously we love pylons, but the great thing about pipes is they're the hidden hero of the energy systems. They're underground, so the planning is perhaps less constrained. But I imagine what you're talking to, are you the electrolyser people?
Yeah.
Part of EDF, yeah.
We don't build the electrolyzers, we build the hydrogen plant.
You build the hydrogen plant, so your planning application is for the production facility, and therefore I know from reading some of the reports lately, there's bits around co-location of wind is one of the main points.
So, yeah, co-location is quite critical, it's also a good route to market.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And there's the point there around planning that you may have some say, but actually you've got grid connection, our connection to our pipes or the local distribution network, Northern Gas Networks. You've got considerations around whether it's a high hazardous facility, and actually you may have some view of where you can go, but actually it's often up and out on an existing brownfield site. So one of the things that I was reading lately was you could look at community benefits, which of course is fantastic, but actually how do you provide within the planning regime support to the local authority to help them understand what it is you're submitting, which of course is the 101 on planning. But as we're getting so much stuff built so quickly, I'm here as like an energy professional going, what you're kind of building the unit and what's the unit doing? And actually we need to have a bigger whole system conversation that talks about lower system costs, because if we keep doing all these builds in isolation, it's going to clog the system. Whereas actually, I think one of the beauties, going back to your point, of the region working as one, is you can have that region view. I'd love to hear from some people that have tried planning in the region, whether that theory is played out in practice, because I know it's one of the things that was part of the original cluster submission.
I think it's a great question, and probably something to talk about at the coffee break, because unfortunately we've run out of time, gentlemen. But it's some great questions. Thank you very much. Sorry for those we didn't get to ask, but thank you both for your time. Much appreciated. And yes, round of applause. Thank you very much, everyone.